Hello everyone. How's everyone doing? I hope everyone is doing well. Hello. How's everyone doing? I want to make sure that everyone is tucked in nicely. Make sure that everyone has a nice... I want to make sure everyone is tucked in nicely and warm. And make sure that you are all in bed, about to go to sleep. Or if you'd like, you can save this VOD for when you are about to go to bed. Yes, this is bedtime. You're all supposed to go to bed. Make sure you're all very, very comfortable, okay? So, the first story we'll be reading tonight is If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. So, you may save this VOD for later if you would like to keep it and if you would like to listen to it later. A 10-hour nap. Okay. Well, like I said, today we are starting off with If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. Okay? Okay. If You Give a Mouse a Cookie by Laura Joffe Numeroff and illustrated by Felicia Bond. There won't be any images. It'll just be me reading. But I hope you know these stories. And if you don't, I sincerely apologize. But that's what we're starting off with. So, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk. When you give him the milk, he'll probably ask you for a straw. When he's finished, he'll ask for a napkin. Then he'll want to look in the mirror to make sure he doesn't have a milk mustache. When he looks into the mirror, might notice his hair needs a trim, so he will probably ask for a pair of nail scissors. When he's finished giving himself a trim, he'll want a broom to sweep up. He'll start sweeping. He might get carried away and sweep every room in the house. He may even end up washing the floors as well. When he's done, he'll probably want to take a nap. You'll fix a little box for him with a blanket and a pillow. He'll crawl in, make himself comfortable, and fluff the pillow a few times. He'll probably ask you to read him a story, so you'll read him one from your books, and he'll ask to see the pictures. When he looks at the pictures, he'll get so excited he'll want to draw his own. He'll ask for paper and crayons. He'll draw a picture. When the picture is finished, he'll want to sign his name with a pen. Then he'll want to hang his picture on your refrigerator, which means he will need Scotch tape. He'll look up his drawing and stand back and look at it. Looking at the refrigerator will remind him he's so thirsty. So he'll ask for a glass of milk. And chances are, if he wants a glass of milk, he's going to want a cookie to go with it. The end. Thank you for following Sergio Gameplays. Welcome to our bedtime story ASMR, or just bedtime storytelling. If you would like to get tucked in and relax while we have some quiet ambiance playing, and we'll be going to bed very shortly, okay? So that was If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. That was a story from my childhood. It's a very simple children's story, but it's one I like a lot. Okay. That was a short one and it got us started. Okay. So, our next story is the story of Rapunzel by the Brothers Grimm. By the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there was a man and a woman who had long wished in vain for a child. Finally, the woman came to believe that the good Lord would fulfill her wish. Through the small rear window of these people's house, they could see into a splendid garden that was filled with the most beautiful flowers and herbs. The garden was surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared enter, because it belonged to a sorceress who possessed great power and was feared by everyone. One day, the woman was standing at this window, and she saw a bed planted with the most beautiful Rapunzel. It looked so fresh and green that she longed for some. It was her greatest desire to eat some of the Rapunzel. This desire increased with every day, and not knowing how to get any, she became miserably ill. Her husband was frightened and asked her, "What ails you, dear wife?" "Oh," she answered, "if I do not get some Rapunzel from the garden behind our house, I shall die." The man, who loved her dearly, thought, "Before you let your wife die, you must get some of the Rapunzel, whatever the cost." So, just as it was getting dark, he climbed over the high wall into the sorceress's garden, hastily dug up a handful of Rapunzel, and took it to his wife. She immediately made a salad from it, which she devoured eagerly. It tasted so very good to her that by the next day her desire for more had grown threefold. If she were to have any peace, the man would have to climb into the garden once again. Thus he set forth once more, just as it was getting dark. But no sooner had he climbed over the sorceress's wall than, to his horror, he saw the sorceress standing there before him. "How can you dare," she asked with an angry look, "to climb into my garden like a thief to steal my Rapunzel? You will pay for this." "Oh," he answered, "let mercy overrule justice. I came to do this out of necessity. My wife saw you, Rapunzel, from our window, and such a longing came over her that she would die." She would die if she did not get herself to eat. The sorceress's anger abated somewhat, and she said, "If things are as you say, I will allow you to take as much Rapunzel as you want, but under one condition. You must give me the child that your wife will bring to the world. It will do well, and I will take care of it like a mother." In his fear, the man agreed to everything. When the woman gave birth, the sorceress appeared, named the girl Rapunzel, and took her away. Rapunzel became the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the sorceress locked her in a tower that stood in a forest that neither had a dare nor doorway, but only a tiny little window at the very, very top. When the sorceress wanted to enter, she stood below and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel had splendid long hair, as fine as spun gold. When she heard the sorceress's voice, she untied her braids, wound them around a window hook, and let her fall 20 yards to the ground, and the sorceress climbed up it. A few years later, it happened that a young king's son was riding through the forest. As he approached the tower, he heard a song so beautiful that he stopped to listen. It was Rapunzel, who was passing the long, long hours of day by singing with her sweet, sweet voice. The prince wanted to climb up to her and looked for a door in the tower, but there was none to be found. He rode home, but the song had so touched his heart that he returned to the forest every day and listened to it. One time, as he was thus standing behind a tree, he saw the sorceress approach and heard her say, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then Rapunzel let down her strands of hair, and the sorceress climbed them back up to her. "If that is the ladder into the tower, then sometime I will try my luck." The hair fell down, and the prince climbed up. At first, Rapunzel was terribly frightened when a man such as she had never seen before came into her tower. However, the prince began talking to her in a very friendly manner, telling her that his heart had been so touched by her singing that he could have no peace until he had seen her in person. When Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her if she would take him as her husband, she thought, he would rather have me than would old Frau Gothel. She said yes and placed her hand into his. She said, "I would go with you gladly. I would go with you gladly, but I know not how to get down." Every time that you come, bring a strand of silk, and I will weave a ladder out of it. When it is finished, I will climb down, and you can take me away on your horse." They arranged that he would come to her every evening, where the old woman came by day. The sorceress did not notice what was happening until one day Rapunzel said to her, "Frau Gothel, tell me, why is it that you are more difficult to pull up than the young prince, who will be arriving any moment now?" "You godless child," cried the sorceress, "what am I hearing from you? I thought I had removed you from the whole world, but you have deceived me none the less." In her anger, she grabbed Rapunzel's beautiful hair, wrapped it a few times around her left hand, grasped a pair of scissors with her right hand, and snip, snap, snip, cut it right off. And she was so unmerciful that she took Rapunzel into a wilderness where she suffered greatly. On the evening of the very same day, the fairy tied the cut-off hair to the hook of the tower, and when the prince called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she let down the hair. The prince climbed up, but up above, instead of his beloved Rapunzel, he found the sorceress, who peered at him with poisonous and evil looks. "Ah," she cried scornfully, "you have come for your mistress, darling, but that beautiful bird is no longer sitting in her nest, nor is she singing any more. The cat that got her will scratch out your eyes as well. You've lost Rapunzel, and you will never see her again." The prince was overcome with grief, and in his despair, he threw himself out of the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell poked out his eyes. Blind, he ran about in the forest, eating nothing but grass and roots, and doing nothing but weeping and wailing over the loss of his beloved wife. Thus he wandered about miserably for some years, finally happening into the wilderness, where Rapunzel lived miserably with the twins she had given birth to. Apparently she was pregnant with twins. I hope they were the princes. Anyway, he heard a voice, and he thought it was familiar. He advanced towards it, and as he approached, Rapunzel recognized him, crying through her arms around his neck. 2 of her tears fell into his eyes, and they became clear once again, and he could see as well as before. He led her into his kingdom, where he was received with joy. For a long time, they lived happily and satisfied. The end. And that, my beautiful chat, is the story of Rapunzel. Okay. Okay. Our next story will be Rumpelstiltskin, also by the Brothers Grimm. Oh, and thank you for the hydrate redeem. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming by. I appreciate all of you. I hope you are falling asleep. And I'll take this time to say that since this is a bedtime ASMR stream, there will be no raid after this because this is supposed to help everyone go to sleep. So that's what we'll be doing. So, just a heads up. I hope you all sleep very well. And I hope this is helping. Okay. So, Rumpelstiltskin by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there was a miller who was poor, but who had a beautiful daughter. Now it so happened that he had to go and speak to the king, and in order to make himself appear important, he said to him, "I have a daughter who can spin straw into gold." The king said to the miller, "That is an art which pleases me well. If your daughter is as clever as you say, bring her tomorrow to my palace, and I will put her to the test." And when the girl was brought to him, he took her into a room which was quite full of straw, gave her a spinning wheel and a reel, and said, "Now set to work, and if by tomorrow morning early you have not spun the straw into gold during the night, you must die." Thereupon he himself locked up the room and left her in it alone. Dun dun dun. So, there sat the poor miller's daughter, and for the life of her could not tell what to do. She had no idea how straw could be spun into gold. And she grew more and more frightened, until at last she began to weep. But all at once the door opened, and in came a little man and said, "Good evening, Mistress Miller. Why are you crying so?" "Alas," answered the girl, "I have to spin straw into gold, and I do not know how to do it." "What will you give me," said the mannikin, "if I do it for you?" "My necklace," said the girl. The little man took the necklace, seated himself in front of the wheel, and whir, 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 3 turns, and the reel was full. He put another on, and whir, 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 3 times round, and the second was full too. And so it went on until the morning, and all the straw was spun, and all the reels were full of gold. By daybreak the king was already there, and when he saw the gold he was astonished and delighted, but his heart only became more greedy. He had the miller's daughter taken into another room full of straw, which was much larger, and commanded her to spin that also in one night, if she valued her life. The girl knew not how to help herself, and was crying, and the door opened again, and the little man appeared, and said, "What will you give me if I spin that straw into gold for you?" "The ring on my finger," answered the girl. The little man took the ring and began to turn the wheel, and by morning had spun all the straw into glittering gold. The king rejoiced beyond measure at the sight, but he still had not gold enough, and even though he was wrecking the economic state of his kingdom, he wanted more gold. Oh, thank you so much, Aurora, for the raid. Welcome everyone to the stream. We are doing a... Thank you for the raid, and thank you, Kijik, for the follow. We are doing a bedtime ASMR stream. So if you would like, thank you for following Alina Asteri. Hello, welcome everyone. And Zeno Barrio, thank you so much for the follow. I hope your stream went very well, Aurora. Thank you so much for the raid. We are in the middle of reading Rumpelstiltskin, and tonight's stream is very quiet, and it's to help everyone go to sleep. So if you would like to keep this on in the background, feel free. And I hope you all enjoy tonight's story time. I'm very glad you all stopped by, and I hope your stream went very well, Aurora. The king had rejoiced beyond measure at the sight, but still he had not gold enough, and he had the miller's daughter taken into a still larger room full of straw, and said, "You must spin this too in the course of this night, but if you succeed, you will be my wife." Even if she be a miller's daughter, thought he, I could not find a richer wife in the whole world. When the girl was alone, the mannequin came for the third time and said, "What will you give me if I spin the straw for you this time also?" "I have nothing left to give," answered the girl. "Then promise me, if you shall become queen, to give me your first child." "Who knows whether that will ever happen, thought the miller's daughter, and not knowing how to help herself in this strait, she promised the mannequin what he wanted, and for that he once more spun that large room full of straw into gold. When the king came in the morning and found all as he had wished, he took her in a marriage, and the pretty miller's daughter became a queen. A year after, she brought a beautiful child into the world, and she never gave a thought to the mannequin. But suddenly he came into her room and said, "Now, give me what you promised." The queen was horror-struck and offered the mannequin all the riches of the kingdom if he would leave her the child. But the mannequin said, "No, something alive is dearer to me than all the treasures in the world." Then the queen began to lament and cry, so that the mannequin pitied her. All right. I will give you 3 days' time," said he. "And by that time, if you have found out my name, then you shall keep your child." So the queen thought the whole night of all the names she had ever heard, and sent a messenger for all over the country to inquire far and wide for any other names there might be. When the mannequin came the next day, she began with Caspar, Melchior, Balthazar, and said all the names that she knew, one after another. But to everyone the little man said, "That is not my name." On the second day, she had inquiries made in the neighborhood as to the people of the names of the people there, and she repeated to the mannequin the most uncommon and curious. "Perhaps your name is Short Ribs or Sheepshanks or Lace Leg." But he always answered, That is not my name. On the third day, the messenger came back again and said, I have not been able to find a single new name. But as I came to a high mountain at the end of the forest where the fox and the hare bid each other good night, there I saw a little house, and before the house a fire was bursting, and round about the fire quite a ridiculous little man was jumping. He hopped up upon one leg and shouted, Today I break, tomorrow brew, the next I'll have the queen young's child. Ha ha ha, glad am I that no one knew that Rumpelstiltskin I am styled. You may imagine how glad the queen was when she heard the name. And when soon afterwards the little man came in and asked, Now, Mistress Queen, what is my name? At first she said, Is your name Conrad? No. Is your name Harry? No. Perhaps your name is Rumpelstiltskin? The devil has told you that! The devil has told you that! Cried the little man, and in his anger he plunged his foot so deep into the earth that his whole leg went in. And then in his rage he pulled at his left leg so hard with both hands that he tore himself in two. And thus the queen and her little child were left in peace. The end. That is the end of Rumpelstiltskin. I hope everyone is doing well. Is everyone staying comfy and warm? Okay. Good, good. Be comfy. Please feel better soon. And make sure to drink lots of water and rest. Our next story is The Master Cat, or more colloquially known as Puss in Boots, by Charles Perrault. There was a miller whose only inheritance to his 3 sons was his mill, his donkey, and his cat. The division was soon made. They hired neither a clerk nor an attorney, for they would have eaten up all the poor patrimony. The eldest took the mill, the second the donkey, and the youngest nothing but the cat. The poor young fellow was quite comfortless for having received so little. My brother said he may make a handsome living joining their shares together. But for my part, after I have eaten up my cat and made myself a muff from his skin, then I must die of hunger. The cat, who heard all this, but pretended otherwise, said to him with a grave and serious air, "Do not be so concerned, my good master. If you but give me a bag, and have a pair of boots made for me, that I may scamper through the dirt and the brambles, then you shall see you're not so poorly off with me as you imagine." The cat's master did not build very much upon what he said. However, he had often seen him play a great many cunning tricks to catch rats and mice, such as hanging by his heel or hiding himself in the meal and pretending to be dead. So he did take some hope that he might give him some help in this miserable condition. After receiving what he had asked for, the cat gallantly put on the boots and slung the bag about his neck. Holding his drawstring in his forepaws, he went to a place where there was a great abundance of rabbits. He put some bran and greens into his bag, then stretched himself out as if he were dead. Thus he waited for some young rabbits not yet acquainted with the deceits of the world to come and look into the bag. He had scarcely lain down before he had had what he had wanted. A rash and foolish young rabbit jumped into his bag, and the master cat immediately closed the strings, then took him and killed him without pity. Proud of his prey, he went with it to the palace and asked to speak with his majesty. He was shown upstairs into the king's apartment. Making a low bow, said to him, "Sir, I have brought you a rabbit from my noble lord, the master of Caraba." For that was the title which the cat was pleased to give his master. "Tell your master," said the king, "that I am very pleased with this gift." Another time he went and hid himself in a grain field. He held his bag open, and when a brace of partridges ran into it, he drew the strings and caught them both. He presented these to the king, as he had done before with the rabbit. The king, in like manner, received the partridges with great pleasure, and gave him a tip. The cat continued from time to time for 2 or 3 months to take game to his majesty from his master. One day, when he knew for certain that the king would be taking a drive along the riverside with his daughter, the most beautiful princess in the world, he said to his master, "If you will follow my advice, your fortune is made. All you must do is go and bathe yourself in the river at the place I show you, then leave the rest to me." The Marquis of Carabas did what the cat advised him to do, without knowing why. While he was bathing, the king passed by and the cat began to cry out. "Help! Help! My lord Marquis of Carabas is going to be drowned." At this noise, the king put his head out of the coach window and, finding it was the cat who had so often brought him such good gain, commanded his guards to run immediately to the assistance of his lordship the Marquis of Carabas. They were drawing to the poor Marquis out of the river. The cat came up to the coach and told the king that while his master was bathing, some rogues had come by and stolen his clothes. Even though he had cried out, "Thieves, thieves," several times as loud as he could. Thank you for the follow. In truth, the cunning cat had hidden the clothes under the large stone. The king immediately commanded the officers of his wardrobe to fetch one of his best suits for the Marquis of Carabas. The king received him very courteously, and because the king's fine clothes gave him a striking appearance, for he was very handsome and well proportioned, the king's daughter took a secret inclination to him. The Marquis of Carabas had only to cast 1 or 2 or 3 respectful and somewhat tender glances at her, but she fell over head and heels in love with him. The king asked him to enter the coach and to join them on their drive. The cat, quite overjoyed with how his project was proceeding, ran on ahead. Meeting some countrymen who were mowing a meadow, he said to them, "My good fellows, if you do not tell the king that the meadow you are mowing belongs to my lord Marquis of Carabas, you shall be chopped up like mincemeat." The king did not fail to ask the mowers whose meadow it was that they were mowing. "It belongs to my lord Marquis of Carabas," they answered all together, for the cat's threats had frightened them. You see, sir," said the Marquis, "this is a meadow which never fails to yield a beautiful harvest every year." The master cat, running on ahead, met with some reapers and said to them, "My good fellows, if you do not tell that all this grain belongs to the Marquis of Carabas, you'll be chopped up into mincemeat." The king, who passed by a moment later, asked them whose grain it was that they were reaping. "It belongs to my lord Marquis de Carabas." Replied the reapers, which pleased both the king and the Marquis. The king congratulated him for his fine harvest. The master cat continued to run ahead and said the same words to all he met. The king was astonished at the vast estates of the lord Marquis of Carabas. The master cat came at last to a stately castle, the lord of which was an ogre, the richest that had ever been known. All the lands which the king had just passed by belonged to this castle. The cat, who had taken care to inform himself who this ogre was and what he would do, asked to speak with him, saying he could not pass so near his castle without having the honor of paying his respect for him. The ogre received him as civilly as an ogre would do, and invited him to sit down. "I have heard," said the cat, "that you are able to change yourself into any creature that you have a mind to. You can, for example, change yourself into a lion or elephant or the like." "That is true," said the ogre very briskly. "To convince you, I shall now become a lion." The cat was so terrified at the sight of a lion so near him that he leaped onto the roof, which caused him even more difficulty because his boots were of no use at all to him on walking on the tiles. However, the ogre resumed his natural form. When the cat came down, He said that he had become very frightened indeed. I have further been told, said the cat, you can transform yourself into the smallest of animals. For an example, a rat or a mouse. But I can scarcely believe that. I must admit to you that I think it would be quite impossible. Impossible, cried the ogre. You shall see. He immediately changed himself into a mouse and began to run about the floor. As soon as the cat saw this, he fell upon him and ate him up. Meanwhile, the king, who saw this fine castle of the ogres as he passed, decided to go inside. The cat, who heard the noise of His Majesty's coach running over the drawbridge, ran out and said to the king, Your Majesty is welcome to this castle of my Lord Marquis of Kalea. What? My Lord Marquis? Cried the king. Does this castle also belong to you? There is nothing finer than this court and all the stately buildings which surround it. Let us go inside, if you don't mind. The Marquis gave his hand to the princess and followed the king, who went first. They passed into a spacious hall where they found a magnificent feast. But the ogre had prepared for his friends who were coming to visit that very day, but dared not to enter, now knowing that the king was there. His Majesty was perfectly charmed with the good qualities of my Lord Marquis of Kalea, as was his daughter, who had fallen violently in love with him, and, seeing the vast estate he possessed, said to him after having drunk 5 or 6 glasses, It will be your own fault, my Lord Marquis, if you do not become my son-in-law. The Marquis, making with several low bows, accepted the honor which His Majesty conferred upon him, and forthwith that very same day married the princess. The cat became a great, great lord, and never ran again after mice, except for entertainment. The end. And that is the story of Puss in Boots. Thank you for the follows. Welcome to this comfy and relaxing story time stream. I hope you all are having a very lovely time. Did you know that Charles Perrault, the author of this novel, was also the author of Little Red Riding Hood and Sleeping Beauty? It's true. Did you also know that Charles Perrault is the brother of Claude Perrault, who is known as the architect of the eastern range, or the eastern wing of the Louvre, of that very famous French museum. So he wrote these stories when he was around 67 years old, and he published these stories under the Tales of Mother Goose. So he is also the originator of Mother Goose. Not every fairy tale is a Brother Grimm story. There are many by Hans Christian Andersen, Charles Perrault, and others. Okay, let me set up our next story. Okay, this next story is a really long one, so I think this will be our last story for tonight. And like I said, there'll be no raid tonight because it is a ASMR stream, and I don't want to. And while I have a lot of friends who are very great streamers, and I suggest you check them out, I don't think it's wise to raid someone and go from one stream to another, even if I do raid another ASMR VTuber. So there won't be a raid tonight. Thank you so much for the follow. We're doing one more good night story. Thank you for the gifted sub. And now we shall start with our final story of the night. The Little Mermaid, written by Hans Christian Andersen. And welcome, Pow Pow, to the Shadow Hands. Although recently I've been calling you the Shadow Bros. Once upon a time, far, far out in the ocean, where the water is as blue as the prettiest cornflower and as clear as crystal, it is very, very deep. So deep indeed that no cable could fathom it. Many church steeples piled upon another would not reach from the ground beneath to the surface of the water above. There dwell the Sea King and his subjects. We must not imagine that there is nothing at the bottom of the sea but bare yellow sand. No, indeed. The most singular flowers and plants grow there. The leaves and stems, which are so pliant that even the slightest agitation of the water causes them to stir as if they had life. Fishes, both large and small, glide between the branches as birds fly among the trees here upon land. In the deepest spot of all, there stands the castle of the Sea King. Its walls are built of coral, and the long Gothic windows are of the clearest amber. The roof is... Thank you very much for the follow. Its walls are built of coral, and the long Gothic windows are of the clearest amber. The roof is formed of shells that open and close as the water flows over them. Their appearance is very beautiful. For each lies a glittering pearl, which would be fit for the diadem of a queen. The Sea King had been a widower for many years, and his aged mother kept house for him. She was a very wise woman, and exceedingly proud of her high birth. On that account, she wore 12 oysters. 12 oysters on her tail, while others, also of high rank, were only allowed to wear 6. She was, however, deserving of very great praise, especially for the care of the little sea princesses, her granddaughters. They were 6 beautiful children, but the youngest was prettiest of them all. Her skin was as clear and as delicate as a rose leaf, and her eyes as blue as the deepest sea. But, like all the others, she had no feet, and her body ended in a fish's tail. All day long they played in the great halls of the castle, or among the living flowers that grew out of the walls. The large amber windows were open, and the fish swam in, just as the swallows fly into our houses where we open the windows, excepting that the fishes swam up to the princesses, ate out of their hands, and allowed themselves to be stroked. Outside the castle, there was a beautiful garden in which grew red and dark blue flowers and blossoms like flames of fire. The fruit glittered like gold, and the leaves and stems waved to and fro continually. The earth itself was of the finest sand, but blue as the flame of burning sulphur. Over everything lay a peculiar blue radiance, as if it were surrounded by air from above, through which the blue sky shone instead of the dark depths of the sea. In the calm weather where the sun could be seen, looking like a purple flower, with the light streaming from the calyx. Each of the young princesses had a little plot of ground in the garden, where she might dig and plant as she pleased. One arranged her flower bed in the form of a whale. Another thought it was better to make hers the figure of a little mermaid. But that of the youngest was round like the sun, and contained flowers as red as his rays at sunset. She was a strange child, quiet and thoughtful. And while her sisters would be delighted with the wonderful things which they obtained from the wrecks of vessels, she cared for nothing but her pretty red flowers, like the sun, excepting a beautiful marble statue. It was the representation of a handsome boy, carved out of pure white stone, which had fallen to the bottom of the sea from a wreck. She planted by the statue a rose-colored weeping willow. It grew splendidly, and very soon hung its fresh branches over the statue, almost down to the blue sands. The shadow had a violent tint, and waved to and fro like the branches. It seemed as if the crown of the tree and the root were at play, trying to kiss each other. Nothing gave her so much pleasure as to hear about the world above the sea. She made her own old grandmother tell her all she knew of the ships and of the towns, the people and the animals. To her it seemed most wonderful and beautiful to hear that the flowers of the land should have fragrance, and not those below the sea, that the trees of the forest should be green, and that the fishes among the trees could sing so sweetly, and that it was pleasure to hear them. Her grandmother called the little birds fishes, or she would not have understood her, for she had never seen birds. "When you have reached your 15th year," said the grandmother, "you will have permission to rise up out of the sea, to sit on the rocks in the moonlight, while the great ships are passing by. And then you'll see both forests and towns." In the following year, one of the sisters would be 15. But as each was a year younger than the other, the youngest would have to wait 5 years before her turn came to rise up from the bottom of the ocean and see the earth as we do. However, each promised to tell the others what she saw on her first visit, and what she thought was the most beautiful, for their grandmother could not tell them enough. There were so many things on which they wanted information. None of them longed so much for her turn as to come as the youngest. She who had the longest time to wait, and who was so quiet and thoughtful. Many nights she stood by the open window, looking up through the dark blue water and watching the fish as they splashed about with their fins and tails. She could see the moon and the stars shining faintly, but through the water they looked larger than they do to our eyes. When something like a black cloud passed between her and them, she knew it was either a whale swimming over her head or a ship full of human beings who never imagined that a pretty little mermaid was standing beneath them, holding out her white hands towards the keel of their ship. As soon as the eldest was 15, she was allowed to rise to the surface of the ocean. When she came back, she had hundreds of things to talk about, but the most beautiful, she said, was to lie in the moonlight on a sandbank in the quiet sea near the coast, to gaze on a large town nearby, where the lights were twinkling like hundreds of stars, and to listen to the sounds of music, the noise of carriages, and the voices of human beings. And then to hear the merry bells peal out from the church steeples. And because she could not go near to all of those wonderful things, she longed for them more than ever. Oh, did not the youngest sister listen eagerly to all these descriptions? And afterwards, when she stood at the open window looking up through the dark blue water, she thought of the great city with all its bustle and noise, and even fancied she could hear the sound of church bells down in the depths of the sea. In another year, the second sister received permission to rise to the surface of the water. And to swim about where she pleased. She rose just as the sun was setting, and this, she said, was the most beautiful sight of all. The whole sky looked like gold, while violet and rose-colored clouds, which she could not describe, floated over her, and still more rapidly than the clouds flew a large flock of wild swans towards the setting sun, looking like a long white veil over the sea. She also swam towards the sun, but it sunk into the waves, and the rosy tints from the clouds faded and into the sea. The third sister turn followed. She was the boldest of them all, and she swam up a broad river that emptied itself into the sea. On the banks she saw green hills covered with beautiful vines. Palaces and castles peeped out from amid the proud trees of the forest. She heard the birds singing, and the rays of the sun were so powerful that she was obliged often to dive down under the water to cool her burning face. In a narrow creek she found a whole troop of human little children, quite naked, and sporting about in the water. She wanted to play with them, but they fled in a great fright, and then a little black animal came into the water. It was a dog, but she did not know that, for she had never seen one. This animal barked at her so terribly that she became frightened, and rushed back to the open sea. But she said she would never forget the beautiful forest, the green hills, and the pretty little children who could swim in the water, although they had not fishes' tails. The fourth sister was more timid. She remained in the midst of the sea, but she said it was quite beautiful there as nearer the land, where she could see so many miles around her, and the sky above looked like a bell of glass. She had seen the ships, but at such a great distance that they looked like seagulls. The dolphins sported in the waves, and the great whales spouted water from their nostrils till it seemed as if 100 fountains were playing in every direction. The fifth sister's birthday occurred in the winter. So when her turn came, she saw what the others had not seen the first time they went up. The sea looked quite green, and large icebergs were floating about. each like a pearl, she said, but larger and loftier than the churches built by men. They were of the most singular shapes and glittered like diamonds. She had seated herself upon one of the largest and let the wind play with her long hair. And she remarked that that if all the ships sailed by rapidly and steered as far away as they could from the iceberg, as if they were afraid of it. Towards evening, as the sun went down, dark clouds covered the sky, and thunder rolled. And lightning flashed, and the red light glowed on the icebergs as they rocked and tossed on the heaving sea. On all the ships, the sails were reefed with fear and trembling, while she sat calmly on the floating iceberg, watching the blue lightning as it darted its forked flashes into the sea. When first the sisters had permission to rise to the surface, they were each delighted with the new and beautiful sights they saw. But now, as grown-up girls, they could go back when they pleased, and as such they had become indifferent about it. They wished themselves back again in the water, and after a month had passed, they said it was much more beautiful down below, and pleasanter to be at home. Yet often in the evening hours the 5 sisters would twine their arms round each other and rise to the surface in a row. They had more beautiful voices than any human being could have, and before the approach of a storm, when they expected a ship would be lost, they swam up before the vessel and sang sweetly of the delights to be found in the depths of the sea, and begging the sailors not to fear if they sank to the bottom. But the sailors could not understand the song. They took it for the howling of the storm. These things were never to be beautiful for them. For if the ship sank, the men were drowned, and their dead bodies alone reached the palace of the Sea King. When the sisters rose arm in arm through the water in this way, the youngest sister would stand quite alone, looking after them, ready to cry, only that mermaids have no tears, and therefore they suffer more. "Oh, were I but 15 years old," said she, "I know that I shall love the world up there and all the people who live in it." Oh, at last she reached her 15th year. "Well now, you are all grown up," said the old dowager, her grandmother. "So you must let me adorn you like your other sisters." And she placed a wreath of white lilies in her hair, and every flower leaf was half a pearl. Then the old lady ordered 8 great oysters to attach themselves to the tail of the princess to show her high rank. "But they hurt me so," said the little mermaid. "Pride must suffer pain," replied the old lady. Oh, how gladly she would have shaken off all this grandeur and laid aside the heavy wreath. The red flowers in her own garden would have suited her much better, but she could not help herself. So she said farewell, and rose as lightly as a bubble to the surface of the water. The sun had just set as she raised her head above the waves, but the clouds were tinted with crimson and gold, and through the glimmering twilight beamed the evening star in all its beauty. The sea was calm and the air mild and fresh. A large ship with 3 masts lay becalmed on the water, with only one sail set. Large ships with 3 masts lay becalmed on the water, with only one sail set, for not a breeze stiffed, and the sailors sat idle on the deck or amongst the rigging. There was music and song on board, and as darkness came on, 100-colored lanterns were lighted, as the flags of all nations waved in the air. The little mermaid swam close to the cabin windows, and now and then, as the waves lifted her up, she could look in through clear glass window panes and see a number of well-dressed people within. Among them was a young prince, the most beautiful of all, with large black eyes. He was 16 years of age, and his birthday was being kept with much rejoicing. The sailors were dancing on deck, but when the prince came out of the cabin, more than 100 rockets rose in the air, making it as bright as day. The little mermaid was so startled that she dived under the water, and when she stretched... One moment, I'll let you know. The little mermaid was so startled that she dived into the water, and when she stretched out her head, it appeared as if all the stars of heaven were falling around her. She had never seen such fireworks before. Great suns spread fire about, splendid fireflies flew into the blue air, and everything was reflected in the clear, calm sea beneath. The ship itself brightly illuminated that all the people, even the smallest rope, could be plainly seen. How handsome the young prince looked as he pressed the hands of all the present and smiled at them, while the music resounded through the clear night air. And with that, we'll have a very short ad break, and I will see you all in 3 minutes, okay? Okay. Bye-bye. Okay, the ads are over? Good. It was very late, yet the little mermaid could not take her eyes from the ship. Real quick, let me see how much longer I have left to read. If I have quite a long... this is a very long tale. Thank you for stopping by, Walker Media. Let me see how much longer I have left to read. Apparently I have over an hour left. Is it really long? Oh yeah, no, it's really long. I think that's what we'll call it for tonight, because I need to start getting ready for bed as well. But thank you so much for the follows, everyone. Let me see if I can find a really short story to tell you all before I go to bed. I would hate to leave you all on a cliffhanger. Okay. If I'll do this and I'll do this another time, and we will finish The Little Mermaid. I promise. I promise. Once upon a time, there was a lovely little chat. Chat was such good that they loved their mommy Eris very much. And as mommy Eris tucked them in and said goodbye, they all said that they would be very good and go to sleep and sleep well, and that they would have a lovely rest of their day. I hope you all have had a lovely day today, and thank you so much for stopping by tonight's stream. Like I said, there'll be no raid. There'll just be a little bit of the ending soon screen, and then I will end stream for the night. Tomorrow I'll be playing Getting Over It tomorrow. Same time. It will not be as peaceful as this, but I hope you enjoyed this. And if you did, please let me know on Twitter. I do check my Twitter more, and it lets me know which streams you guys liked. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of your evening. Sleep well, okay? Bye-bye.